You guys know that I've been a pretty faithful pfSense user for a very long time. I took you all along with me when I purchased, upgraded, and tested a Sophos SG330 as a pfSense firewall. I made a video on creating a forbidden pfSense firewall in VMware ESXi the right way. I've tested and installed pfSense on a variety of small form factor systems, and I've been a huge advocate for pfSense in the home lab and for personal use for a very long time. But sometimes things change, and that's what this video is all about. Hey there, home labbers, self-hosters, IT pros, and engineers. Rich here. I've been running pfSense for years now. For the last 3.5 years, I've been using the Sophos SG330 system I bought off eBay, and it's been a solid and reliable system, especially after I upgraded the CPU. But it's getting very old at this point. Sophos built and released that product in 2014, and it's also very loud. Considering the age of my gear and the annoyance of the system's noise, I decided it was time to make a change, or at least come up for air and evaluate what's out on the market and decide where to go from here. Before I can safely decide on what piece of hardware or software I'm going to use, I need to make sure I know what my actual use cases are. Time for a little death by PowerPoint, friends.
When I do one of these requirements gathering exercises, I typically build the decisions around two main categories: necessary and nice to have. Let's start with the necessary. I have a 5 gig internet connection, so I need to support at least that speed for firewalling, packet filtering, and IDS/IPS. The minimum network speed for my network is 10 gig, so the device must support 10 gig connectivity. On top of that, my 10 gig connectivity is served by SFP+, so I want the device to have SFP+ cages for simplicity. The system must be able to function as a router on a stick and do all of my layer 3 routing for my network. The system needs to support IPsec, WireGuard, or another method for site-to-site connections between Brandon and John's places. The system needs to be rack mountable, as that's where all of my HomeLab gear is located. And finally, the system must be quiet, preferably fanless. Now let's get to the nice-to-haves. I'd like the system to have a modern user interface. I'd like the system to handle DHCP and DNS functions for my many VLANs. If the system is going to be handling DNS resolution, I'd like to be able to do URL filtering for ads and spam. I'd like to be able to handle GeoIP blocking on the device. And lastly, I'd like the system to be able to provide VPN connectivity into my network using Tailscale.
Alright, so we have our list of needs and wants. Now with that in hand, we can start looking for gear that fits.
I first started looking at what Netgate had to offer for gear, which ranges from around $190 US for a Netgate 1100, all the way down to their Netgate 8300 rack-mounted monster that tops out at nearly $3,600 US. That's quite a swing in prices. With the requirement for 10 gig SFP connectivity, the list of applicable devices drops down to basically the Netgate 6100 at $850 US, the Netgate 8200 at $1,400 US, and the Netgate 8300 at $3,600 US. Oof, those are some pricey systems.
I know what you're saying right now. You're saying you're doing it wrong. You should be building a replacement. Sure, I could do that again, or I could go online and find another $350 purpose-built chassis like I did with the Sophos SG330. But I don't want to do that this time, and here's why. First, I lucked out with the SG330, and I think finding that sort of opportunity again will be harder, which means I'd have to build a system which won't be cheap. Hell, the SG330 wasn't cheap when I bought it and then upgraded it either. Then, if I go that route, I'll be on the hook for a yearly pfSense Plus licensing at $130 US. So it's entirely possible that building or buying a system and adding the pfSense Plus licensing could cost me the same as the Netgate 6100. So that's Netgate's offerings. Let's take a look at what the dark side has to offer.
Where Netgate had 6 total offerings, Ubiquiti has a head-spinning 10 total different firewall offerings, all with different performance, features, and more. That being said, it's relatively easy to narrow down which UniFi products would best fit my needs, because even though many offer SFP+ connections, few of them can handle the 5 gig throughput requirement.
Without boring you on the nuances of which firewall to compare it to, let me jump ahead to the contenders I'm considering from both companies and why I'd seriously consider one over the other. From the Netgate side, weighing in at $1,400 US, straight out of Austin, Texas, the one, the only, the Netgate 8200.
The Netgate 8200 is a 1U rackable system that features an 8-core Intel Atom C3758R CPU running at 2.4 GHz and includes QAT for AES-NI encryption and decryption. The 8200 has 120 GB of NVMe M.2 storage, 16 GB of DDR4 RAM, has 2 10 gig SFP Plus ports, 4 2.5 gig ports, and 2 1 gig combo RJ45 SFP ports. Netgate claims the system is capable of up to 18.6 gigabits a second of L3 forwarding, 18.5 gigabits of firewall throughput, and up to 3.24 gigabits of IPsec VPN throughput thanks to the QAT crypto processing. It's a beefy unit.
Here's why I like this system. First off, it meets all of my needs since it's pfSense and I'm running pfSense now. It's got all the connectivity I need, it's fast as hell, and I'm sure it'll do an incredible job if I choose it. But it's got a massive downside though. It's expensive. Very expensive. Cost isn't the deciding factor here, but it's a very important data point in decision making. Let's take a look at the contender from the Ubiquiti side, weighing in at $600 US from the East Coast, out of the city that never sleeps, New York City, the myth, the legend, the UniFi Dream Machine Pro Max.
The Ubiquiti UniFi Dream Machine Pro Max features a quad-core ARM Cortex-A57 CPU running at 2.0 GHz, features 32 GB of eMMC for the UniFi controller software, 128 GB of SSD storage for UniFi Protect, and 8 GB of system memory. For connectivity, the system has two 10GB SFP Plus connections, one 2.5 gig Ethernet connection, and 8 1 gig Ethernet ports for downstream devices. The UDM Pro Max supports IPsec, OpenVPN, and its own SiteMagic VPN functionality for site-to-site, as well as a variety of different client VPN solutions, including WireGuard, OpenVPN, and L2TP. Ubiquiti claims the system is capable of handling up to 5 gigabit IDS IPS traffic.
Here's why I like this system. It meets all of my needs in terms of throughput, performance, connectivity, and rack mounting. It will also be able to replace my self-hosted UniFi controller for all my other UniFi gear in the house, which gives me a nice single pane of glass user experience, and it's very reasonable in terms of price, coming in at $600 US. So if both of these systems will satisfy my needs without issue, then let's see how they compare on my nice-to-haves.
Let's break down these two systems based on my list of nice-to-haves, starting off with a modern user interface. Both systems have what I would consider a modern user interface. I've never really had any issue with the pfSense UI being easy to use, quick to find things, and so on. And no one can argue with the UniFi dashboard being anything but a modern UI that is easy to use and navigate. I'm giving both of these systems a checkmark here, but I will give UniFi 2 checks because it does win out in looks. Next, DHCP and DNS functionality. Hands down, both systems can and do handle DHCP and DNS functionality without issue. These days, services like these are table stakes, meaning they all come built in and they're all basically the same in terms of features. One check for both. So let's talk about DNS filtering for ads and spam. I'm a big fan of pfBlocker NG and its massively configurable lists, options, and more. In my opinion, nothing in the market that is free provides this much value, period. UniFi now offers DNS filtering built-in as well, though I've been hearing from users who leverage it that it can be intrusive and aggressive. Many of the people who have used the UniFi DNS filtering have taken a Pi-hole as an alternative. For this, I'm going to give pfSense 2 checks and UniFi 1. What about handling GeoIP blocking on the device? Both systems, either via packages like pfBlocker NG for pfSense or natively built into UniFi, offer GeoIP blocking and they function without issue. So that's one check for each. And lastly, VPN connectivity using Tailscale. Here's where things get a bit complicated. pfSense has a native install package for Tailscale freely available, so adding your firewall to your tailnet is as easy as onboarding the device, configuring your subnets, and away you go. UniFi doesn't support Tailscale, but it does support WireGuard, which is fundamentally what Tailscale is built on top of. This doesn't specifically help me since the nice-to-have is native Tailscale. This can easily be resolved by spinning up a Tailscale VM or Docker container within my network instead of landing it on the firewall, but it's still an extra step. Based on that, I'm giving pfSense the check and nothing to UniFi for this one.
Overall, both platforms can provide my nice-to-haves without much issue. There are nuances, as I mentioned, like DNS filtering and Tailscale, but in both of those cases, there are relatively simple workarounds that can mitigate those shortcomings. Then there's the price difference between the two platforms. Again, price isn't the deciding factor, but it definitely adds serious weight to decision-making. So what now? Well, I'm still not entirely sure which way to go. I think it's time to phone a friend to get their opinion, someone who's been down this road ahead of me, somebody like Tom Lawrence.
Tom, I thought you would be the best person to talk about this because I've seen you go through a bit of a journey here as well, from being, heavy pfSense to bringing in UniFi and starting to talk more about UniFi Gear. And then I think you even switched over to running UniFi at home for you, right? That's what runs your HomeLab as well.
Well, yeah. Currently, my HomeLab is UniFi. I still have some pfSense in the lab. It just isn't at the front line anymore. It was always the reverse, where I would have the pfSense first and then that. And it's still a mix because I have several places where things are set up and lots of clients we manage. And there's still a lot of them on pfSense, but there's a growing number of mine UniFi. And a lot of that came about with version 9. I had said for a long time, if they make a proper firewall, And I was very honest about this. I would be more than happy to try it out. And version 9 has been a speed run of a lot of good ideas. It's a big change. And there's actually people who, because they let you, I don't know how long to let you hang on to this, but they let you not upgrade from the way version 8 worked. Like when you upgrade from 8 to 9, you don't have to switch to the new zone firewalls. But it's better if you do, but it is different. So if you know the old way of the UniFi firewalls, which by the way was spaghetti. I don't know whoever thought that was a good idea to present a firewall and a set of rules like that. But I just looked at it and said, that is confusing and that is way harder. The zone-based system was such an improvement.
So yeah, I mean, I've been also wrestling over the price difference for what you get. Like if you look at the Netgate stuff, to get into something that can support like larger multi-gig internet, you end up in this price level that just seems, I don't know. It feels like compared to what you can do with UniFi too, the price is just like, it kind of becomes a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, it's we're in a weird spot in firewalls, and it's great that I'm seeing people who have really high-speed connections, and that's awesome. Across Europe, across here, all the world seems to be a little bit faster connections, a lot more fiber, and I love hearing it. But it's kind of hit this bottleneck where a lot of firewalls stop at 1 gig and have trouble routing above that.
So what are your thoughts on like the user experience? I mean, I think that I'm so used to pfSense that it feels modern enough for me, right? But compared to the UniFi dashboard with the single pane of glass and all that kind of prettiness, it's hard to compare.
Yeah. So first I want to say, I do feel this pain in me of not being able to build these. That bothers me a lot. I'm a big build it, not buy it type person. I try to do that as much as I can, build whatever, a NAS or anything else. But it's gotten to this point, and it's part of the compellingness that they offer at UniFi. The fact that they're not charging licensing fees or recurring fees, I wish it was open source. The open source nerd of me is breaks my heart a little bit. I'm very conflicted in it. This is not easy. This is painful thinking about. But back to that single pane of glass. I have the ability to manage my switches, manage my Wi-Fi, see all of it from the firewall to the rules to the tracing of a packet, where it all went through across the entirety of the infrastructure by not going through multiple places, by going to a place for all the knowledge. Yeah. Once you've kind of experienced that, it becomes very challenging. She's like, I love this entirety of this. It's just so much more visible. Oh, I want to change the Wi-Fi, and all of my devices, I have several, Wi-Fi around the house and things like that. Oh, let me just add a Wi-Fi real quick. Let me change the setting, and it broadcasts all of them, and it's integrated with the switching. It's integrated with the firewall. The entire thing is just like being able to do policy routing where I can take a specific system, build policies that'll apply wherever that system goes. They've just done a really nice job on UniFi. And this is not always the case. This is after version 9. So feel free to call out the older version of me that said, hey, this sucks, because it did. But they made it better. And isn't that what we don't just say, whether you're a YouTube creator or a commenter, we don't say this sucks for no reason. We say this sucks, could you make it better, is kind of what we mean. That's our feedback to these companies. Can you make this suck less? And I think they took the time to make it suck less. And it's a compelling offer to be able to have that. And I know this is the most overused term in our industry, single pane of glass,
right?
But you kind of get a single pane of glass for a lot of your network infrastructure. And it is compelling to see someone do that.
Yeah. And I think that coming from the enterprise side of things, where I used to look at pfSense as more of an enterprise analogous to some of the bigger firewalls that I work on, I'm looking at more modern gear from companies like Juniper, and I hate to say Meraki because I'm not a fan of Meraki for certain degrees, but that whole end-to-end, like you get a full, complete, you can follow packets through, you can follow clients through, you know exactly what's going on. And the fact that it's free post-purchase is kind of mind-blowing to me, because that's what people charge money for, right? So that's awesome.
We are at peak. I hope we're at peak, because I don't want it to get worse. And I'll use a word, feel free to bleep it out. So I just finished Cory Doctorow's book, Shitification, and great book. But he talks about us really ramping up to this point where it has gotten to the point where no one's wanting to produce a product. They want to produce something that they can extract rent from you on. Mm-hmm. It's like the goal is this commonality we see across everything that comes out of Silicon Valley now is I'm not making a product you can buy. I'm making something I can rent to you to extract all future potential revenue from you. And the UniFi not doing that is just blowing my mind. And everyone says, well, one day they will. And maybe they will. I don't know. Sure. I mean, I hear them say the words they won't, but I know there's been other companies in the past that said words too.
How did you, I guess, handle your migration from your pfSense in your HomeLab to UniFi? There's been a lot of debate. I was talking to a bunch of people in my community Discord, and it seems like the answer is you need to start over fresh and wipe all the existing UniFi devices, because I run a self-hosted controller now, right? So
you can migrate. I did not lose my port settings or anything.
Oh, okay. That's a relief, because that's a
I know that would have been pain. So if you go to, so you have your self-hosted controller, and with the self-hosted controller, you have, the multi-site instances, et cetera, et cetera. You're not going to be able to export the full multi-site if you're using it. You have to export your site. And if you only have one site, perfect. You pick that site and export away. When you bring it into something like a UniFi Dream Machine or any of the ones that have the controller built in, you just import that one site. All of your settings will change over to the other one. It won't redo any ports. All your VLANs will copy. Now, because you're not using a UniFi device, this is where it gets a little tricky, but they've got a path for this. Now, this is what impressed me. When you build a VLAN, and I build that VLAN in pfSense because I'm using two different interfaces. So pfSense, I built VLAN 20, and in UniFi, I defined VLAN 20 as third-party router because I don't have a UniFi router. Right. How do you get that over to your UniFi Dream Machine being the router? It's actually pretty easy. You can hit a pull down and say, instead of third-party router, it'll have it in the list because it realizes that the controller attaches the UniFi Dream Machine. Even though they're physically one box, it looks at it as a separate device. So it's going to say, hey, look, you've got a Dream Machine as one of the potential routers. Okay. It'll actually list all your other devices that offer layer 3 routing. So if you have some of the UniFi switches that have layer 3 routing services, they'll show up in the list as well. But what you're doing is you're swapping, though, the third-party router in the pull-down to the UniFi Dream Machine being the router, which then ungrays out all the menus. You set the DHCP ranges to be the same. You set if you're 172.16.16/ whatever your network is, you define the network in there, you hit save, and it now takes over the functions of DHCP and routing for that segment. All your port labels are the same. Your VLAN tags are the same. Nothing else changes. It's actually I was impressed with how easy that part was. That's the part I was like, this is pain. I have a lot of VLANs. I have a lot of network segmentation. I labeled all my ports like a proper sysadmin.
Right. Yeah,
I don't want to do this again.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, not only mention like storage network configurations and interruptions caused by the UniFi shuffle is to me, at least, kind of a real thing where it's like, oh, I made a change. Well, guess what? There might be an interruption right now because depending on what you changed to the switch might have a downstream effect to the rest of your stuff. So
yeah, there will be some blips because I think some things may have to get restarted, but those are minor. You can plan for them. Like I think the switches will have some packet drops when they go, hey, I'm not on this controller and migrating over here, but it's not. Yeah. At least the biggest part is all the labels and everything. To me, that's like the pain part.
Yeah, all the work I've done. Yeah, especially like in my controller now, like all my devices are labeled properly. I even did the icons for everything. Like I know what it is because I did all that human effort, and the thought of having to lose all that and do it all over again was kind of like a major deterrent.
I never did the icons, so I don't know if those come over or not. I didn't do those until after I moved because all my DHCP was always pfSense, so I never bothered with whatever UniFi had discovered. Now, when I move versus when you're moving today is going to be very different. They did not have at the time an import-export manager for DHCP. Now they do. So because that's a feature, you can export out of your pfSense all your DHCP reservations and addresses and import them. So that is something absolutely you could do. Now pfSense is going to dump them out as XML, so you have to do some parsing. Or here's a fun sheet. Go to your DHCP lease list, highlight that, paste it into a spreadsheet, and align that spreadsheet, export it as a CSV, and upload it into your UniFi.
Is there anything you miss from pfSense in terms of like anything? Basically, that's an open-ended question.
Yeah, this is definitely one where I didn't have to open up Wireshark as much. Now, I'll jump right into Wireshark because I really want to look at the packet flow of something. The packet flows are kind of delayed and latent to that. So they're like this, like you see them, but you don't see them in real time. I miss the PF top where I could just watch flow and connection. So my solution is to jump into Wireshark. I mean, you could do things from the command line too, but I just, if you're not familiar with this, one of the things that I did a video a long time ago, maybe I should do more of them because it's kind of a fun tool. The Wireshark can do SSH. So you set your SSH keys up so it can log into your UniFi. It works for pfSense as well. I've done it. That's why I did the video on was with pfSense, but I can cover it on UniFi now. You have it log in directly to the system via SSH. And then it does a TCP dump and pipes it back over SSH right into your Wireshark. So you're getting real time over SSH. Nice. Yeah, it's actually, it works great with pfSense, by the way. I've done it because when I need something on pfSense, even if that pfSense is remote, what you can do is go into Wireshark and add filters. Like I only need to see data going between these IP addresses. So run TCP dump, pipe it back over SSH into this Wireshark session that's on my local computer, but only if it matches these parameters that I'm setting forth, like UDP, TCP, or certain IP addresses. Works the same with really any device. You can do this with Cisco. You can do this with anything that has TCP dump loaded on the command line. So any Linux system, which is, or FreeBSD. So that's going to be your pfSense or your UniFi system, and TCP dump is available on your UniFi Dream Machine. So you can just log in and grab that data and have it piped right in there to see it. But the control you get inside of pfSense in that menu, it's just so nice to do that in a web interface. That is a big miss in my opinion. Something I've had to use less, but some people may also completely call me out on this for UniFi. This is a big missing part of UniFi. The level of customization you get for OpenVPN or any of the VPN settings, they're far more extensible for IPsec and OpenVPN inside of pfSense. You just have more, you can use all kinds of different older algorithms or ways you want to set things. You can do weird things in pfSense. UniFi, it's more like the Apple world where we have this option or this option.
Yeah. I already have a plan for that because I use Tailscale, and with the native integration of Tailscale via the package in pfSense, it's there and it becomes an exit node and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll miss that, but the answer to that is spin it up in a Docker container or a virtual machine behind the scenes and just do it that way, right? And just
I use NetBird, and that's exactly my workaround. I still actually use both. I use NetBird and Tailscale, and I've got not on the same system. They will conflict if they're on the same system, but I have different systems running them, and it's running in a Docker container as an exit node because there's not any likelihood that UniFi would. They're not someone like pfSense that works with third parties. And by the way, pfSense. We'll just say that they're not easy to get third parties working with them because I know the people at NetBird have been trying for a little while to get their plugin in there, and it's not easy to get approved, which is here or there. But I do miss having some of those direct integrations because I was using Tailscale directly integrated because it just worked.
I'm a big fan of PF Blocker NG. And I use that for all sorts of geo-blocking, which I know you can do geo-blocking pretty easily. But I've heard that I've heard from the community that their DNS filtering is kind of I've heard people say it's not good enough, and then other people say this is UniFi, or that it's too restrictive, and you turn it on and boom, your things are being blocked that shouldn't be. Like, are you using it on your own?
So I went ahead and paid for the cybersecurity subscription because I wanted to try it out. And I said, instead of being in a video, not sponsored by UniFi, I paid this out of my own pocket. I did not want anyone to bias me. I just wouldn't bought it. It's nice if you have the cybersecurity subscription. If you don't, it feels really basic. It doesn't nearly have as much knobs for PF Blocker. But that being said, I had problems with PF Blocker. One of them is my wife's clicker games. It turns out they're ad supported. So if I block them, her clicker game quits working and she's unhappy. So I started using it less, and I'm looking up at my browser because I use uBlock Origin. I'm just gotten to the point where I just use uBlock Origin. I'm just like, I worry less about the ad blocking. because it's just the tediousness of anytime someone else besides me, because I don't care if the ads aren't there, but apparently I don't play clicker games like my wife does, those little apps that you play. They get mad though some of them get mad when you turn off ads.
Oh yeah.
So it's less of an issue for me, but I will admit the fine grain control is not bad. They do some good, decent blocking with it, but you just don't have that fine grain control visibility. You also don't have the ability to load custom block lists, and that's where PF Blocker shined, was being able to really customize it. You don't have any easy way to do that off of a URL. Being able to create aliases off of a URL would be a cool feature if they had it in UniFi, so you could do that again, because that's all they're doing. And PF Blocker is utilizing a native, it's not a PF Blocker feature, it's a native feature of pfSense to be able to pull a URL in, query that URL on a certain basis and say, hey, go ahead and pull that list of malicious bad IPs or things I want blocked and populate a rule with them. PF Blocker facilitates that to make it a lot easier, but it's a native function of pfSense. So I would say that level of alias control also lends itself to be, it's missed. It's just not in UniFi.
My alternative for that is if I have that bad of a time with it, I think that I'll just launch, I'll put together a pair of pie holes and pull my lists in that way, right? And
yeah.
There's always ways to solve these problems, right? Just might be a little extra step, right?
Yeah. Now, on the other side of that coin, something pfSense doesn't have, but UniFi does a great job of, is kind of back to that cybersecure. Even without this cybersecure, it does SNI. So it has the ability to do server name indicator I believe that's what it's doing, is that and DNS to figure out what websites people are going to. So their website analysis is really good, and the ability to block on an individual computer basis, going, I want to block, like I'm going to create a group, I'm going to create a VLAN or a specific network, and I want to block adult content on that. That ability is there, and just click a button and build in. And then you can look at each individual computer and say, what sites did those computers go to? This is a big advantage you have over pfSense, is like that visibility you just didn't have. How much time do the kids spend watching YouTube or Netflix or things like that? And how much data did that represent? That information is a lot more available in UniFi. They're deeper packet analysis they're doing, which is something you're going to see in a lot of the other firewalls. The fact that they have it in there, and then to go that step further, if you buy the subscription, I remember if it's like $100 a year, you get way more granular control over that. Now you can still manually list whatever you want, but if you want the pre-bought list, everyone wants that to be free. And I'm like, it's a list of websites that UniFi is buying at third party. And by the way, if you looked at what that costs in enterprise firewalls, that's usually a huge upsell.
That's perfect. Well, you've given me a lot to think about, and I don't see any reason not to do it. So I just, again, Tom, I always appreciate all of your time, right? You hanging out and give me your experience. And it means a lot. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely, man. It was fun. Hopefully it helps people along their journey of choosing what they got to choose.
I always appreciate getting Tom's input on things like this. He took this journey before I did, so getting his thoughts really helped solidify my decision. This conversation is but a snippet of a much longer conversation about UniFi versus pfSense that Tom and I had. If you guys want to see that full conversation, leave a comment below and I'll post up the full discussion. So let's talk about what I've decided to do. I'm going to join the dark side. And here's why. First, nearly all of my production networking gear is UniFi, so adding the UDM Pro Max will fully complete my end-to-end single pane of glass user experience. Secondly, it's the cheaper option of the two. Even if I consider dropping down to the Netgate 6100 at $850, the UDM Pro Max is still cheaper by $150. Third, I really do think there's something to be said about the innovation that's happening from Ubiquiti. And fourth, after this purchase, there are no additional yearly fees to continue using the software. Now, there are a few things I'm gonna have to deal with, like the lack of native tailscale remote access functionality, which I'll fix by running it in a VM in Proxmox. And in regards to the less than stellar functionality of UniFi's DNS filtering for ad blocking, I'm going to give it a shot first, take Tom's advice, and give the cybersecure add-on a try. And if it's really as bad as most think, I'll spin up a pair of Pi-hole servers to do my blocking. Now, all that's left to do is to sell my soul to the dark side. Let's get it installed.
First step is to get the old firewall out of the cabinet, put it on top of the rack so that I can put the new one in and keep the internet running while I do my migration. So let's get to that now.
Now to slide the UDM Pro Max into its new home, screw it into the rack, and power it up. I'm going to be using temporary SFP Plus twin-ax cables for the initial setup of getting the UDM Pro Max online. First connection is to the LAN side, and the second connection is to the WAN side. And the display lets me know it's connected to the internet and now ready to set up, which we'll do via the UniFi app. I already have the UniFi app installed on my phone. Once I opened the app, I was greeted with a new device found dialog box that feels very Apple-esque. Tapping on setup, the app connects to the system and gives me the opportunity to name my new firewall. I'm going to go with 2GT UDM Pro Max. At the bottom, there's an option to restore from backup, but that's only if I had a cloud backup of another UniFi device, which doesn't help me here at all. Next, the system does a speed test, which shows some odd asynchroncy on my WAN connection, but I'll concern myself with that later. We'll hit next to move on. Now the system is checking for new firmware, downloads the most recently available update, and installs it, which took a bit to complete. Roughly after a minute and a half of real time, it was ready for me to go to the dashboard. Or so I thought. On the next screen, I was greeted with an updating firmware screen that took about 2.5 more minutes to complete.
From this point on, we'll continue migrating configs from my self-hosted controller and configure everything in the web client in my browser. Let's talk about configuration migration.
Alright, let's get logged into my self-hosted UniFi controller, head over to Settings, then over to System, and then head up to Backups at the top. Now we'll click Download, change the duration to no limit so I can get all of my history, and then I'll click Download. Boom, now I've got a complete backup of everything from my controller. Time to import this bad boy into the UDM Pro Max. Now from Site Manager, we'll open up the new firewall, head down to Settings, then to System, and then up to Backups like we did on the local controller. This time we'll click Restore, select the backup that I just downloaded, and click Open. Here's where I ran into a problem. The version of the backup I took from my local controller is newer than the running version I have on the UDM Pro Max.
At first, I was in a bit of a panic thinking I'd have to just rebuild everything. Then I got smart and remembered something that Tom had said to me in passing. Make sure your UDM Pro Max is updated to the most recent version of network software, which I hadn't done.
Heading over to the control plane section, I was indeed behind on versions for the network application, so I kicked off that update. After the update completed and the system rebooted, it was time to try again. Then to System, and up to Backups again. Now to Restore, then select my backup again, Open, and success. I had a few sites running on my local controller, and I can only import one, which is fine, I just want the 2GT site. So I'll select it, and click Restore. Now I guess I just sit here since there's nothing really communicating to me what's actually going on. After what felt like a good 3 minutes, I saw that everything had imported. However, while I saw clients appearing and data moving, none of my other UniFi devices would connect to my new UDM Pro Max.
Turns out this was my fault. Once the migration was completed, I needed to also go and shut down my old local self-hosted controller since the old and the new systems were conflicting with each other. Once that was done, everything connected and I was in business. The last thing for me to do was just to manually rebuild the DHCP server scopes and any reservations I'd set and recreate all of my firewall rules to get the system up and running. Oh, and I needed to also shut down my pfSense system as well since the new UDM Pro Max was now the gateway for my subnets. After about a solid hour of working through everything, I was done. Let's take a look at it now.
Welcome to my single pane of glass. It's really nice to have complete network information in one place. In the past, I was living in a duality of UniFi for LAN and pfSense for WAN. Now it's all in one single location, which is really nice. Heading over to my UniFi devices page, everything was successfully imported and I had to do 0 reconfigurations on my gear, which is the way. The import kept all of my manually created icons and names, so that's awesome. Up top, you can see my Wi-Fi SSD and configurations came through without issue, and in networks, you can see the different VLANs and corresponding subnets tied to the UDM Pro Max. I took Tom's advice and added the cyber secure protection to give it a try. Here you can see I've created a whitelist for region blocking, and I've enabled all of the active detections available in Cyber Secure. I opted to start with zone-based firewalling and make sure that all of my rules are in place to block different subnets from being able to communicate with others explicitly. And down in logs and flows, we can see allows and blocks happening at the edge. Everything looks damn good.
There's one thing to add here that I wanted to share with you about the firewall logging that's not on by default. And if you are setting up firewall rules between VLANs and devices, you're gonna want to enable it.
I was having some issues passing packets between different zones I'd set up in the firewall rules. The thing was, I wasn't able to see any east-west logging at all by default. Turns out you have to enable that for your zones to get that visibility. To do so, select the zone you want to log, Grab the last rule in the list below. For my internal zone, it's the Allow All Traffic rule. Click it, and make sure you have syslog logging checked. If you don't, you'll never see any east-west traffic logging for that zone, which, when you're trying to troubleshoot as to why something got blocked, it's immensely necessary to have that information.
All right, let's get to my final thoughts. At this stage, I'm really happy with the replacement. There is a bit of me that feels like a traitor, but I remind myself that brand loyalty is for suckers, and coming up for air, evaluating the alternatives, and making a decision if it makes sense is always the right thing to do. I still have a soft spot for pfSense. I hope they move to modernize their user experience and innovate more. In 3 to 5 years, I'll be doing the same thing I did here together with you, giving them another evaluation and seeing how they've come along. The UDM Pro Max is overkill for most people who might be watching this unless you have a use case. And thankfully, Ubiquiti has a bunch of different reasonably priced UniFi firewalls that can fit most people's needs, so if you're considering leaving pfSense or upgrading from consumer-grade gear, give them a look. As time goes on and I get more familiar with the system, I'm going to make future videos checking in after I put some miles on the odometer. Till then, I'm going to enjoy my end-to-end network visibility. And that, friends, will do it for this video. Special thank you to Tom Lawrence for hanging out, chatting with me, and helping me solidify my choice. If you liked the video, subscribe. If you have something to say, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.